My career started out in Uganda as a young journalist in Uganda. Then I moved to America. Initially, I didn't get into journalism right away. I first did all the other odd jobs. Eventually, I ended up doing journalism again. But my story really starts as a young guy. I was a young man dreaming to be a reporter. I wanted to be a reporter. I think one of the stories that really ignited my interest in journalism was the Gulf War, 1990, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and the Americans went there. So I remember sitting in front of a TV with my parents and watching TV, and I wanted to be a reporter standing in front of a tank. So that's what really ignited my interest in becoming a reporter. That dream later on became a reality when I finished, when I went to university. I decided to do journalism and mass communication. And it's there that I met other people who really inspired me as a young reporter. In fact, one of the people who inspired me to be a reporter spoke to some of your students sometime back, and it through him, called Dr. Shakasali, it through him that I met Honorable Kojo Yanka, and that's the connection that we have. I would say 15 years ago, I was in the same boat. I was just like a young reporter, also trying to figure out how to make it, whether to get into journalism. What was journalism about? One heart said, go into it. Another one said, no. My dad was very supportive. My mom wasn't. Everybody around me didn't want me to go into the journalism career because they were like, oh, journalism, there's no jobs, nothing. But for me, it was more about passion. I was very passionate about journalism. I really wanted to become a reporter. And I did everything that I could to become a reporter. So what started out as a dream started becoming a reality. I started being that through a lot of hard work. Okay. One, to be a reporter, you really have to study hard, like you guys are doing. Make sure that you read a lot, not just reading newspapers or just reading about what's going on around you, but beyond just things that you do at school, beyond things that affect you in your community, because you have to be broad. So that's the one thing that I learned over the years as trying to be a reporter. Because if you notice, let's say reporters in a community, they play an important role. People look up to them for all sorts of information. So just imagine this, your grandmother or anybody comes up to you and say, hey, what's going on? Have you heard it? So if you are not the type of person who is curious or inquisitive enough to know what's going on, it can be very hard. So as a reporter, you read, and you can never take anything for granted. The other thing that works for me is practice. And since you guys are aspiring journalists, practice makes perfect. And don't assume. Just if you have a story that you want to do, if you want to do anything, practice. Because with practice comes the experience, comes a lot of things. You get better. If you're writing a story, reread through it like so many different times. If you want to go on radio, to read a script on radio, don't just come and, make sure you have headphones on, you read, and you listen to yourself how you sound. Try as hard to practice. Because at the end of the day, if you want to be a radio broadcaster, you have to be really good at it. That's how you're going to beat competition. That's how you're going to stay in the business. That's how you're going to be able to interact with other people. Mm-hmm. So, and it's a tough business out there. It's tough. But if you identify what you want, you can do it. Okay. You can do it.
So, we'd like to know, how long have you been in the field of journalism?
For about 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have some challenges?
Absolutely. I mean, journalism is very interesting in so many ways. Number one, the challenges are from getting a job or to finding the right, because journalism is so broad. If you want to be, for newspaper journalists right now, it's not the best time to be a newspaper journalist, right? You want to be a multimedia journalist because most newspapers are cutting down or are closing because the readership has gone down since everybody has a phone. So that's like the biggest challenge right now. So if you are looking at studying like just print, think about how many people read newspapers. So you need to broaden it. So for you, not to be caught up in this whole thing, you need to think big, think outside of the box. If you're going to be studying journalism, don't look at journalism from one angle. You have to look at it from all angles. If it's print, you do it. If it's TV, you do it. If it's radio, you do it. So that even when you're looking for a job, you have more things to play with. Let's say if they're looking for a broadcaster, you already know how to do what? Broadcasting. But broadcasting alone is not going to take you anywhere. You need to know how to write. You need to know how to read well. You need to know how to do edit, all sorts of things. So it's a combination of so many other things.
So, we would like to know why you came to Ghana.
Well, that's a very good question. Number one, there is so much happening in Ghana. One of the reasons why I came to Ghana is to identify young people like you guys who are doing extraordinary things. People who are trying to help their communities, people who have started small businesses and they are looking for a way out. Maybe they are looking for that one big break. So one of the reasons why I came here is to identify young entrepreneurs, young innovators, young artists, young journalists, people who are really trying to get out there and doing everything they can to be better in what they are doing, to uplift their communities, to inspire other young people, create employment. So those are the kinds of people that brought me to Ghana. I felt the need of like wanting to tell the story because there is a lot about Africa. When you cover Africa, there is so much going on. In most cases, Africa is overshadowed by the negative news. But there is so much good news happening on the continent. It's right here. Sometimes we don't see it. So as an African, I say, you know what? One of the things that I want to start doing is looking for positive stories. Stories where people are doing things that are helping their own communities. So that's one of the reasons why I came to Ghana. Number two, I came to visit Ghana to see the people, to interact with you guys.
That's nice. Okay.
Right, so I'd like to know, how do you blend the two? I mean, talking about your work schedule and then your personal family issue. How do you manage the two?
Well, that's a tough one. Sometimes I have to ask for permission to do what I do. But jokes aside, I think with any profession, really, you're going to figure out, you're going to have those challenges. You're going to figure out, sit down with, if you're married, you're going to sit down with your husband. If you're not married, you're going to figure out how to talk about those things, because the kind of job that I do requires me to travel a lot. 75% of the time I'm out there. So that's a conversation that I have to have with my wife, right? I have to talk to her and say, you know what, that my job requires me to travel. If I don't travel, I don't make any money. So you have to strike a balance. And she will understand. She understands that my job depends on that. She does other things, so we sit down and talk about it. So that's the kind of balance. But it's hard, especially if you're traveling a lot. It can be a challenge too. There are so many risks involved. anything can happen to you while you're traveling. So it's a big challenge.
Okay. And then one thing I would also like to know is, you mentioned that you came to Ghana because you want to identify young entrepreneurs. And then I would like to know how you are going to identify such persons, like through which mechanism or instrument or channel are you going to identify this kind of people?
That's a good question, Helen. I think one of the things that I use personally is the social media. Most of the stories that I'm covering, I'm doing them because I reached out to people before I came. I posted some stuff on Facebook, on Twitter. I said, hey, looking for ideas. I want to come to Ghana. What's happening in Ghana? Who is doing what? So then I started getting a lot of feedback from people I didn't even know, people telling me what was happening in Ghana. So I started going through some of the things, and I would look up a name, then do some research about the name, Google them up, or do all sorts of things, or go to their Facebook page, Twitter page, and see who they are, what they are about. Then I would follow up, get their details, and call them up. I say, you know what, I'm coming to Ghana, I want to meet you. You have an inspiring story, you are doing something great. I want to be associated with what you're doing. Can you let me in? If I come to Ghana, can I see you? Can I interview you for these stories? That's how I did. The other thing, I have an intern from Ghana. He also helped me a lot. I asked him, I said, there are so many things going on in Ghana, especially with young people. What is it that I can do in Ghana? Then he also gave me some ideas.
Okay.
Yeah, that's...
So do you just identify them, or you do something to help them at the end?
Of course, any publicity is good publicity.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to do, for me, I feel like I'm trying to give them a voice. These are people who are doing extraordinary things, right? Whether they are helping their young ones to go through school, or their young brothers and sisters go through school, whether they are making nice dresses like that, whether they are making hair. I think when you get that, like international publicity, you never know who is watching. You never know who might see it. Some people, I'll give you an example. Like last year I was in Malawi, and I interviewed a guy. I told him about a program that they were looking for young innovators. You submit an idea, and this idea is vetted among other. There were like 600 submissions. So I told him about a competition that was taking place, organized by the U.S. State Department. It was taking place in Morocco. And they had reached out to young people all over the world. So I told him about it. I said, you know what, you have a great idea. This is a guy who had made, a charger called Padoka charger. In Malawi, they use a lot of bicycles. And most people have phones, but they don't have a way of charging them. So he made a charger that you can use when you're pedaling, right? So when I saw him, I was like, wow, how did you come up with this? He said, he told me the story behind the story.
On the bicycle.
On the bicycle, he said, look, I use a bicycle for everything, but if I want to charge a phone, I have to go to a neighbor where I pay money. So I came up with an idea of creating a charger that I can use on the phone. So I said, why don't you submit this idea to this tech competition? I gave him the address, the website, and sure enough, he went and submitted. Guess what? He won the top prize, $50,000. So I asked him, what are you going to do with this $50,000? I'd even actually forgotten about him, but because of that small publicity that I gave him, I did a short video for him that they used when they asked him to present his idea to the entire group. First of all, there were 600 people who submitted their submissions to that competition. out of 600, he was shortlisted. When he was shortlisted, he was excited. He called me up. He said, you know, I can't believe this, I've been shortlisted. I said, just keep praying and whatever, and be the best. Rehearse, practice, whatever you have to do there. So on the day of when he was shortlisted, he was even given a free ticket and whatever to go and present his thing. Then they went through all that. Come the announcement, they announced him as the winner of the last year, 2014, GISTEC. You can look him up. GISTEC competition. His name is Mixon Falwaki. So that's the kind of impact I think I can make by trying to identify young people, you know. So to me, that was even more, personally, professionally, I think if I can do that for many people, what else? That's more rewarding than even the money that, you know, I get paid to do those stories. For me, doing that kind of story where somebody does something for himself and wins big, it's more rewarding.
That's
Yeah.
incredible.
So I want to know, how do you prepare for such an interview? I mean, aside the background check that you run on them.
No, you see, for me, I'm a very untraditional, very unstructured. Eh? So, like, I would come here, just hang out with you, right? Then, as I'm hanging out with you, I'm just observing, doing all sorts of things. Then I'll start like asking you questions. Sometimes I always walk with my camera. In most cases, I press the record button. And you'd be amazed by what you get. The best answers are usually stuff that people say when they know you're not recording. But don't do that. Don't do that, right? When you're going to do a story, a nice story, you always want to establish a rapport with somebody. You come, I introduce yourself, you sit down, you get to know the person. Don't just go and say, hey, I want to do a story about you. No, it doesn't work that way, because people need to feel comfortable around you. And when you're doing an interview, it's like as if, I usually use this example. It's like as if I come to your living room. I am seated in your living room. Of course, you've made me comfortable. You've welcomed me. So if I'm doing an interview, I use that. I want you to feel comfortable around me. Once I get that from you, then I can interview you. Because in most cases, when people see like a camera, they tend to hold back, or, you know. So, and it can, in most cases, it doesn't work very well. So for you to break that, you just need to figure out a way of breaking that barrier by interacting with people. And once you open up to them, they open up to you, you get the best interview. So that's the one thing that I do for every interview that I do. I just don't come and interview you.
Okay,
Yeah.
our last question.
Uh-huh.
You traveled around Africa.
Yes.
You visited many countries in Africa. What does that tell you about the continent?
I think that's a good question.
The future of the continent.
I think the future of the continent is bright. Young Africans like you guys are trying to do everything possible to keep the continent going. The one thing that maybe over the years I've discovered is that Africa has amazing stories. Africa has some of the brightest minds, young people, right? And there is so much excitement on the continent that every time I go to a country, I learn so much from there. Young people, with the technology in our hands, the internet in our hands, I think what is going to stop us is, there's nothing that is going to stop us. The sky is the limit for young Africans, because I see that. I can see it in your face. I can see it. There is nothing that is going to stop you. And that's the kind of feel that I get from other young people across the continent. When you talk to them, they're so excited about tomorrow.
Yeah.
They have challenges, but they're like, you know what? Nothing's going to stop me. And one of the reasons why I usually do what I do because I tell myself that, you know what, I can do anything. And I carry this thing with me every single day. Eh?
Failure is not an option.
Yeah. So I tell myself every single day that, you know what,
Wow.
I cannot fail. Failure is not an option. So you cannot fail. Be the best at what you do. If you really want to make it, try as hard to be the best. Don't be good. Don't be a mediocre. Whatever you do, be the best.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
Yeah.
very much for the interview.
No worries, no worries. You're most welcome.
And it's been great having you around.
Well, be my guest. I learned from other people. If I need my contacts, I can give you my contacts.
Sure.
If you ever need anything professionally, I can help you because I also learned from other people who came before me,
Okay.
and I would not mind sharing.